Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to continue working on my 1973 Moto Guzzi Eldorado. We're going to get the cylinder heads back on, get the exhaust back on, just see how far we can get putting this thing back together. I noticed this valve stem had not really a groove worn in it, but it looks as though that rocker shaft's been running in one spot for a long time. Not so much on this one, the other head's even better, but almost like this valve has not been rotating. I'm going to give it a couple love taps with a hammer and try to twist it manually to get it in another spot before we put it back together. There, so that turned that wear mark 90 degrees. So now hopefully when it runs and runs for a while, it'll turn like it should. You can see on the other head it's got marks kind of randomly dispersed. So maybe that valve was too loose, too tight, who knows. We'll leave it like that and put it back together. We'll see how this angle works out. There's our installed cylinder. There's a head gasket. Appears as though it can only go on one way. Assuming that's the oil return, it would almost have to be because the feed line's separate. So there we go. I'm not going to put any sealer on there. This will be the left side cylinder head. Cleaned up as much as I want to clean it up. There should be a new sealing washer in my gasket set for that. And then it looks as though we're going to have 4 O-rings to put on. Let me round those up. There's a sealing washer. We won't need that yet until we torque the heads down. 4 O-rings. Next, the rocker stand. These wave washers. Everywhere there's a head nut, start by lightly just pulling these down. As far as torque, I've seen anywhere from 27 to 32, so we're going to go with 30. I'm going to start out with 20. So now we'll go up to, I'm just going to go with 30 foot-pounds. Right there. So it's like 37-ish Newton meters, something like that. The idea is just kind of a circular crisscross motion. And we'll see if we can follow that in the manual. Looks like this would be number 1. 2, 3, 4, 5 down here at the bottom. 6 being the Allen head one here at the top. Now we'll repeat all that. Okay, this being an air-cooled engine, I suspect after some cycle time we'll need to go in here and retorque these. Guess this can go ahead and go back in. Has a new aluminum crush washer on it. There's probably a torque for that too, but I suspect snug is probably fine. We're a little bit past snug. I guess that's why I was meant to own this 26mm wrench. That should be good. I think next we'll go to the other side and put that head on, and then we'll work on the valve train. Now we're on the right side. Put this on right. This is our exhaust. The labels kind of came off, but I kept them together. rocker arms. You really can't mix them up. So this has proven kind of difficult to get in. The OD of this pin, trunnion shaft, or even rocker shaft, whatever you want to call it, is 15 millimeters. Got a 10 millimeter socket, and its OD is about 14 and a half. So I've got it lined up with that. Let's see if we can get it in now. Okay. And then this bolt secures the shaft. Oh shit. With a lock washer, and that thing just fell down in somewhere. We need to find that. So that lock washer actually fell down the pushrod tube where the pushrod runs. Luckily I was able to fish it out. I could see it down there. So you need to be extra careful with that thing. All right. We'll double check the tightness of all this before we put the covers on. Let's see how lucky we can be with this side. And I lost the socket all the way through it. That's all right. At least it's not in the engine. Very carefully holding onto that lock washer. While we are over here, go ahead and hook the oil line up before I forget. There are new aluminum crush washers in the kit, the gasket kit. So back to this side, go ahead and turn the engine over by hand. Go ahead and put the pushrod tubes in. These labels stayed on. So this would be left side exhaust. Down there. Since the piston on the other side was already at top dead center, it made installing the rocker arms really easy. So we'll rotate this around until these rocker arms are, feels like on the base circle. So I'll have to go double check the other side. I may have screwed up. This side didn't really shoot apart and I still had it on the shaft. Looks like the spring actually goes against the rocker, and the spacer goes against the rocker stand. I'm not really sure what difference it would make. Likely none, but try to make it right. I've corrected the rocker arm shim misplacement on this side. I hate it when people point, sorry. Anyway, figure next up, we'll go ahead and drain the engine oil, since I'm pretty sure this stuff's been in here since the 1980s. Right there's the drain plug, if you can see it. Let's see what condition it is in. I probably should have done this way early in case there was some massive problem. Actually, kind of looks like motor oil. So we'll let that drain a little while, and then we'll figure out what we're going to put in it. And then before we put the rocker arm covers on or any of that, we'll go ahead and crank it and make sure we get oil at the top end. That's the oil I put in it. That's what I had. That's what I use in my truck because it's pretty much worn out. It has a flat tappet cam, so it needs the extra zinc that's typically in diesel oil. So I figured it'd be a good start for this. The rider's manual says this holds like 3.5 quarts, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's touching the dipstick. I really hadn't planned on getting this far today, but figured let's go ahead and spin it over, make sure we oil the top end, and then I'll go and set the valve clearance after that. It sounded like it when I cranked it way long time ago that oil was circulating. I did pour some oil across the valve train. See what happens. The oil pressure light on the dash is going out. Looks like we're getting oil up through the valve rocker shafts. I'm getting that on both sides, so I'm happy with that. Next we can set the valve lash. So we can go ahead and set the valve lash and put the rocker box covers on. Based on the information I found, intake 6 thousandths, exhaust 10 thousandths, which equates to 0.15 millimeters and 0.25 millimeters. So let's see if we can turn the engine over by hand and get everything at 0 lash or on the base circle. Well, we can actually go to top dead center on the compression stroke. It should be about right there. So 10 thousandths and exhaust, which is actually kind of tight. I'm kind of surprised. 10 thousandths exhaust. Let's recheck. Okay. Intake supposed to be 6/1000. Call that good. Recheck that. Good enough. Let's go to the other side. I've cleaned up the valve covers. Y'all may remember they were completely coated with RTV. So I've gotten all that crap out of there. The outsides don't look the greatest, but I think it might be easier to polish them on the bike. I have new gaskets, so at this point in time, I'm just going to put them on. I'm not going to worry about seal or anything. So it looks like your best bet is to get the valve cover gasket on there and then the valve cover. And start a few by hand. And don't snug any of them down. Until they're all close to being bottomed out. We can put the little heat shield leg guard thing on. See the hell way it went. We can put that on at a later time. Clean this exhaust tube off as much as I can get it clean. Tried to clean the chrome up. I also pulled all this stuff off, cleaned down here in the engine case, polished this chrome as much as it would get clean. Now we're ready to get the exhaust back on. I also cleaned up all these clamps. They were pretty nasty. So the exhaust is a copper kind of O-ring that should crush in there and create the seal. I cleaned up these nuts too. I'm going to go ahead and put some anti-seize compound on here just because I love this stuff so much. In case I ever need to take this apart again. I'm assuming I just pop that on there, put it in the hole and get the nut to start. I also ran a wire brush around in there to make sure those threads were cleaned out. Okay, so it starts fine. I guess you just need to have the angle right for it to start. All right, that's starting to get snug. So I'm going to go ahead and get these put on down here the frame before I tighten that all the way up. So this one I know was right here. I think this other one was towards the front. And they're kind of big little, smaller part goes on the frame, bigger part goes around the exhaust tubing. Those frame clamps are on there and they're just snug, they're not super tight. Don't really have a torque wrench or a way to set the torque on that. Back those off just a hair. Make sure this isn't in a bind and it'll tighten all the way. Yeah, that gave me a little bit more. don't want to go crazy and like rip the threads out of the head either. All right, I'm gonna call that side good. I took this floorboard off and cleaned it up. I also cleaned as much of the side of the engine case as I could. Originally I thought this may have had an oil leak or the pan was leaking. I have a feeling it was from errant oil filling where it just gooped the whole side up. So I cleaned as much as I could. I'll probably, once we get it running at a later point, take the pressure washer and try to get the rest of that off. But for now, I can put this back on the crash bar and we can get this exhaust on. Don't remember if I videoed it or just took a picture of it, but this bike has a crossover pipe between the two rear mufflers. Somebody had performed a delete on this one, and there was red silicone and tech screws and a piece of sheet metal covering that hole. So that crossover pipe was removed. I would assume so they could run that massive rear tire, but I welded up the holes where the screws were, and the hole was still there. So it turns out a piece of 1-inch pipe fit in that hole. So I welded on stubs on each side. So I'll need to really clean these mufflers up, but then get it on, and then I'm gonna have to make a pipe to go between the two. That crossover pipe needs to be about 12 inches long. And go from there to the other side. The tire's in the way. Not as in the way, I guess, for the reason they hacked it off, but anyway. I can buy that pipe, but I'm not sure because the original mufflers were hacked off. I was given these exhaust pipes off of something. I don't know. Some kind of dirt bike, I guess. So I'm going to try to hack these up because the inside diameter is about the right size. So I'm going to try to cut these up and turn them into a crossover pipe. So as a little update, I happen to have this piece of wood that was a test piece that's actually 12 inches line to line. So I cut the ends off each of those pipes. They're kind of the right length, and then I cut one of the bends out. So I should be able to fine tune this, and I'll weld this together, and then we should have a crossover pipe. So I ground on it, cut a little more off. Now I think I'll tack it together and then make sure it fits again, then I can fully weld it, provided it does fit. I've tacked it together and test fit it. Seems like it'll work. So now I'll grind off all this rust, and so I can get a decent weld and weld it together. So after some welding, some grinding, there we go. Put it on the bike, or get it as close as I can get it to get it on there, and it seemed like it'll work. I'll probably cut some slits so it'll clamp down around the mufflers, and then I'll figure out, I may have to make clamps because finding something that small is probably gonna be a little bit difficult. Or I might just use hose clamps, who knows. Probably clean the rest of the rust off here, and I think I have some high temp paint. I'll hit that with it. I only had standard black spray paint, so we'll see how long that lasts, but I cut a slot, well, drilled a hole and cut a slot in each side, and by using hose clamps on there, it actually snugs up pretty well. But in order to get all this on there, I'm going to have to take all this, and I'm going to have to swing this exhaust pipe out, put this crossover pipe in, and then swing it back. So I won't bore you with that. I'll try to get that done off camera. I'm going to end this video right here. Next time, we'll see if we can get the fuel system cleaned up and start this thing up. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and see you soon.